this chapter, Inanition, and inanition is a word that means basically exhaustion caused by a lack of nourishment, but often it's used also in a sexual context where it can mean a lack of vigor or enthusiasm. But in this case it's got multiple meanings, but all of which are related to Lally. And this happens in the third term of her Form 4 year, which is when the matrics or the prefects are chosen for the matric year the following year. And this is a time that causes a great deal of tension in the school as people are trying to get votes and trying to put their best foot forward, etc. The usual story in terms of prefectship. And ultimately what happens is that Lally is left out of prefectship and she's sort of confirmed in her position as a skulker at the school, which is basically a second-rate citizen. So this becomes an issue in Lally's life, and it also leads to further food and eating disorders. She loses her appetite completely and she doesn't want to eat, and this means that she gets put to the head of the table where the teacher and the head prefects can kind of monitor her eating. And she gets quite depressed and she doesn't like this sort of new stressed way of living, and she decides that perhaps she needs to end it by committing suicide. She thinks of a number of different options, and one of them that she starts trying out is she tries to undo the bars at the top floor of the girls division, and she has the intention of jumping out to kill herself. Now one evening as she's doing this, she notices a movement catches her eye outside in the plots, which is where the sort of agricultural side of the school is, and there's an old shed there. And she notices that out of this old dilapidated shed in the evening, a young Xhosa boy sneaks out of the door, and he carefully looks around and he finds a log under which he puts his hand and he feels around, comes out with food. And Lally's able to work out that he's basically hiding in the shed and that someone is putting food under this log outside during the day, and in the evening he comes out of the shed and he takes the food. Now one of the things that the boys and girls at the school were doing is that they were streaking. Streaking had become fashionable, and so particularly the boys were streaking in front of the girls' dorms at times, and it was the sort of latest craze. And one evening as Lally's watching to see this Xhosa boy come out to get food, she notices out of the corner of her eye a movement, and she sees Bowyer, Macgrath and Preston streaking across the front of the girls' dormitories in the direction of the shed. And the young Xhosa boy has come out to get his evening meal, and he doesn't see them, but she does. And what happens is that Macgrath, Bowyer and Preston see the Xhosa guy, and they dive down into the grass unbeknownst to him, and he carries on merrily, has his food to eat and goes back inside. Of course this drives Lally crazy because she realizes that this little guy's in danger and that he's going to be reported to the police probably, or at least the school, and there'll be trouble. So she desperately tries to get out of the girls' dormitory, but she can't. And ultimately she gets caught by the head girl and made to go back to her room after having her weekend privilege taken away. And this is extremely stressful for her, and she goes back to her room and she looks out the window and she keeps wondering what will happen. And after about half an hour, a police van arrives with a brigadier in, die Leipert. And he and his henchmen knock down the door and they take the little Xhosa boy off into detention. And this is, of course, is extremely upsetting for Lally. And the next day she makes an excuse to go back to the dorm to tell Nomda, that's the sissy who comforted her when she was in tears the one day, and she tells Nomda about the incident. Nomda, of course, is besides herself and doesn't know what to do, and she insists that Lally says nothing to anybody about it. Lally at first suggests that she goes to the police, and then she realizes the stupidness of those words. And at this stage there comes a crucial time in Lally's psyche where she makes a conscious effort to cut herself off and not feel anything emotionally. So up to now she's been fairly cold. She calls herself, in one part of the book, the ice, what is it, the ice fridge or something. Uh, she refers to herself at this stage as the ice chamber, because of her ability just to shut off coldly things that affect her. But now when she gets involved with Nomda and her son, she feels that she's opened up and become vulnerable. And when Nomda breaks down and cries, Lally's actually angry with herself for letting her guard down and allowing others to kind of hurt her feelings in a way. It's made her vulnerable. And she decides that she will not let it happen again, and she permanently closes off. And this is the sort of watershed moment where she actually consciously almost decides to forget these things. And so these things are deeply buried when it's 20 years later and she's asked to testify at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. As a result of all this, at the school, a new society is formed by the children, and it's called the Kafir Bashing Society.